You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Wednesday, April 23rd, Draft Day Eve. There's so much to talk about regarding the draft, 49ers, and who they might draft. And so I have a great guest for all those topics that we'll be discussing here today. None other than 49ers beat writer Matt Barrows of The Athletic. Matt, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be on with somebody who's as psycho about the draft visits as I am. I feel like I'm the only beat reporter that really goes nuts about it. And I noticed that you do the same thing, and you really follow all of the reports out there, and you do a great job collecting those in a database. And I will freely admit, I checked that out real closely when I was trying to do the final list of visitors. I'm talking to a kindred spirit, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure. That means so much, because I think I use your final 30 visit article as my cross check as well. So it's cool to know you do a bit of cross checking with mine too before making that. And happy to help. I mean, yes, I am a bit of a psycho when it comes to 49ers draft and just games that the 49ers went to, what scouts were at pro days, just all the little small details that probably don't even matter in the grand scheme of things, but I nerd out about. So I have no shame about that. So happy to have you on, Matt, and talking about the 49ers draft. Before we get into any draft talk, though, I do want to start off asking you about a report that came out from, your athletic colleague, Diana Rossini. She came out and said that George Kittle did not attend the 49ers offseason voluntary program because of the current contract negotiation that he's, waiting on right now. Also, in that same tweet, there was a photo, and in that photo, the text read, "He wants to be the highest paid tight end." And of course, George Kittle responds to the entire tweet and says your sources are incorrect. And so I'm wondering, I want to get your thoughts, Matt. What part of that do you think George Kittle was responding to? The fact that he didn't go to the offseason program because of the contract, or the fact that he wants to be the highest paid tight end, or both?
Well, thank you very much for dragging me into this this mess. This he said, she said, literally. In this case, the fact of the matter is, I don't know. I think Diana was very well sourced on it, and it may be that things changed. I don't know what that means for the contract itself. Whether that means that they're further along all of a sudden than they were, but to answer your question directly, I thought that his response was a response to he's not there because of a contract reason. And I don't know whether that's true or not. It is interesting that just about everybody else showed up. And he's a team guy through and through, locker room leader. You go down the list. And so, his buddy Christian McCaffrey's there, Fred Warner's there, Brock Purdy is there. So I don't know. It had the, I don't know the answer, but it had the ring of something that seemed correct when she put it out there. I do know that initial contract negotiation between Kittle's agent and the 49ers a few years ago was rough. And I didn't think it was out of the realm of possibility that they were kind of girding and buckling down for another such negotiation this time around.
Yeah, I agree. And Kittle doesn't normally, attend the voluntary portion of the offseason program anyway. So I'm with you. I think that was probably more so the part he was responding to. I mean, hey, I'd be surprised if he didn't want to be the highest paid tight end. He certainly deserves to be, even at his age of 31. And of course, Trey McBride being 25. I think that'll probably enter the conversation for the 49ers. Like, hey, this guy's younger than you. This is probably your last contract extension. But I'm not too worried about that negotiation. I think they'll get it done. It's April. It's early. They got time to hash this one out. And I am encouraged also because, I feel like they're handling it the right way with Brock Purdy. And it seems like maybe that's heading towards getting done sooner rather than later. Although it always feels like that at some points in the offseason. But I really do feel with Brock Purdy, they're not really going to mess around too much. And, Diana also had some positive things to say about the direction of that one. So, I'm not too worried about where negotiations are headed this offseason, thankfully.
Yeah, I mean, the Brock Purdy showing up is positive, and as you know, the sooner they get that one done, the sooner they can get to the rest of their business, which includes George Kittle and possibly Fred Warner. Those are the big ones on the to-do list. Fred Warner, by the way, didn't seem. I think he's signed for an additional year, one more year than Kittle is. So he did not seem like he was preoccupied with that. And he was doing the Fred Warner thing, which is, working out at the facility and being the team leader. I mean, he's the guy when it comes to that. He's really he and Kittle are the team spokesman, unofficial, but they speak for the team. I just remember Kittle's comments after the incident where the linebacker walked off the field. That to me was showed who is the voice inside that locker room.
Yeah, and all those players, Purdy, Kittle, Warner, great examples of guys who have been hits in their draft that have become the leaders and foundations of their team. And now they're in a position, with this draft, especially on the defensive side of the ball, to find more of those guys potentially. And so this is a good pivot, I think, to the draft talk. And, obviously the 49ers picking at 11, it seems like whether they want to move back or not, more than likely, like they're going to stand pat unless something crazy happens in the top 10. But Matt, it also sounds like the top 10 could get crazy. It didn't really feel like that. Maybe like a week or so ago, it felt like maybe there were just a couple questions about what the Giants were going to do, what the Saints were going to do. Now I have questions about almost everyone. And it's because we're getting all these little nuggets and pieces of information at the 11th hour. Much of those came, earlier today with everyone dropping, their articles and their pieces of everything that they've heard. And so the big one for me now is Jaguars, because everyone's wondering, what are they going to do? Much of this offseason through this draft process, it's been Mason Graham getting mocked to the Jags. And now there's talk of, them potentially having a trade in place, with the Bears, them potentially going with an offensive player instead. And who might that be? Will it be Genty? Will it be Ted McMillan? So this really opens the possibility for DT1 in this draft to start sliding a little bit, because if he doesn't go to the Jags, and maybe the Jets, I think, are looking to go a different direction. They could go Membu. It's possible that Mason Graham falls to 11, or at least in that range. Have you sort of started to get that sense as well? And how do you feel like that changes the draft for the 49ers, seeing as how a player who maybe they didn't even think would get to them at 11 could potentially be there?
Yeah, I mean, I've been hearing murmurs of that for a while now, I think since before the combine, which is that Mason Graham is tapped out. Like he showed everything that he's going to be in college. He's not quite as big as everybody else, as long, as quick. I mean, I've talked to people who think that Kenneth Grant is the better of the two interior Michigan defensive linemen, because Grant's upside is massive. And Graham's his floor is high, but it's close to his ceiling. whereas Grant wasn't all that consistent in college, but people think that he could be something special. And that's why you take him early in the first round instead of Graham. As far as if he was there at 11, I don't think it changes their draft strategy, because I think that they're just ready to take the best defensive lineman there. And if it's Graham, I think they'll happily take him. So if it was Graham, they would sort of pencil him in as their 3 technique, I think. And he's good at that. I mean, is he better than Walter Nolan at that? I don't know, but I think that their whole 2025 draft is sort of a puzzle, where if you get that 3 technique at 11, at some other point you want to get the nose tackle type. You want to get the Tyleik Williams or Jamari Caldwell from Oregon, the Texas nose tackle. There's a few of those types of guys. CJ West at Indiana, Maryland has one as well. So, this is a deep draft at defensive tackle. So they can kind of combine it in a number of ways. But yeah, I have heard that about Mason Graham. I've been hearing that for a while. Whether it's true or not, we'll find out tomorrow. Maybe around this time of day. It probably will be. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting if he gets to 11. The question then becomes, do the 49ers have the same take on this guy as the 1 through 10 teams did? And do they go with a Nolan or a Derek Harmon at that spot? He's not Solomon Thomas. But there are some, the critiques of Mason Graham are similar to the critiques of Solomon Thomas, which is that he's not a huge guy, and that when you get into the NFL, the centers and guards that you were taking advantage of in college are gone. These are all the guys in the interior were either elite guards or were tackles in college who have been moved to guards. So there's real length there now. And so they're getting their hands on this guy a lot earlier than maybe, the Indiana guards or the Purdue guards were able to. So, I mean, I just wonder whether the experience with Solomon Thomas makes them a little bit gun shy about taking somebody with that physical profile.
Not just that, but also he's from Michigan, and the 49ers haven't had a lot of luck with some of these Michigan guys that they've brought in. Tracy won't like me mentioning that.
Oh boy, I mean, it's freaking out right now somewhere. I think I heard her in Southern California.
It's true though, and honestly, like having watched both Mason Graham and Walter Nolan, I personally came away liking Walter Nolan's game a little bit more and feeling like that would be a bigger fit for what the 49ers need more so than Mason Graham. So I think you're right. Like it really depends who the 49ers have ranked higher, right? Do they see Mason Graham as the DT1 in this class as the better fit for them? Certainly if both of those options are on the table and they go with one over the other, we'll have our answer. But there's other players in the mix, right? Barrows. And I think, Edge. Sorry, I call you Barrows. I mean, I'm so used to hearing Tim call you that because I listen to your guys' pod all the time, and so I'm channeling, I guess, Tim K there. But so
that's never good. That's never good.
Yeah, I should not do that. But at Edge, I think that's the other option that they'll have there, and they have, I think, 3 players that make a ton of sense, and I think you've mentioned them a bunch as well. Michael Williams, Shamar Stewart, who's linked to the 49ers a lot, and maybe even some dark horse that they can get as well. But there's a couple of edge guys that could be available for them too. And so do you have any sense on, from the 3 or 4 guys that continue to get mentioned there for the 49ers, like how would they rank those guys? I think Michael Williams would be ranked highest from the 2 edge guys between Stewart and Williams, because I think Williams has the higher floor. He's the better run defender. He can set the edge. Stewart, it's a big question mark. He has the athleticism, but his floor is it's in the basement, and so I think that's how I see it. But I kind of wonder how the 49ers see it, because obviously I think, someone like Chris Kosarek, who he's been rumored to, love Shamar Stewart, right? He could see the traits and be enamored with him. But I think Michael Williams just has a little bit more to work with right off the bat. But how do you kind of see all those four guys, like from Stewart, Williams, and Nolan, and maybe even Harmon, because those I think are the four guys that you've kind of mentioned as well. Do you think there's a certain ranking that they have, or like if you had to guess, how would you rank those guys?
If I had to guess how the 49ers are ranking them, I would say it goes Williams, Stewart, and here's where it gets complicated. Nolan is one of these guys who reportedly have character questions about him. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the exact thing is. I don't think it's anything, police blotter related, but it's just how he comports himself at the various schools he's been to. And so he was one of their visitors. And he's, by the way, a perfect example of somebody that they would bring in for a draft visit. He's somebody that they really like on film, who fits their scheme, and who has a character concern. And so Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch want to get the most or the best sense of who that type of player is. And what I don't know is what they came away with when he did visit. I don't know what the result of that was, but let's just say that they're wary of that. I think that Derek Harmon might be ahead of him on their ranking. It depends on. I think that Nolan is the better fit for what they do, but Harmon is the safer pick from a character standpoint. And Harmon, I don't know why everybody keeps mocking him to the late 20s, because he's good, and he penetrates the backfield, and he's got size. He kind of gives you a little bit of both nose tackle and three technique. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. It might be that he's being kind of undervalued, but to get to the top of that list, I think Williams is on top because of everything you said. There's more production there. His production last year is only mediocre because he was dealing with a high ankle sprain from the first game basically onward.
Right.
And that, plus the fact they really bring those guys in and out of the game at Georgia. They've got so much talent there that they platoon all of their defensive linemen pretty heavily. So he ends up having fewer pass rush opportunities than just about everybody else in this draft. So when you're kind of adding up sacks, you kind of have to look at, how many pass rush opportunities the guy had. But both of those guys, Stewart and Williams, have just the strength and the long arms that I think that the 49ers are looking at. They never get knocked backwards. They're always the ones who are knocking the tackle, and heaven forbid that it's a tight end, back 2 or 3 feet. And I think the 49ers really like that. That's a 3-down guy right there. And it was something that was real problematic last year, especially at the end of the season. Teams were able to run against the 49ers. So setting that edge, I don't think that that's an issue with either of those guys. I just thought that Williams was more instinctive than Stewart was. Stewart had sort of more wow plays, but I thought that Williams was more consistent. They looped him around. You can line either of those guys up in the middle. Both of those guys rushed from sort of like a standing defensive tackle position quite a lot. So these are big, strong guys. They're not finesse guys. So that's my sense of what the 49ers are looking for if they went with defensive end at 11.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good sense. And you mentioned Harmon and why maybe people are mocking him in those 20s. Well, I did see like in the last couple of days, people talking about his medicals being flagged and very vague, right? We don't know exactly what. I think Ben Albright, talked about it as well, who, he's pretty well plugged in with the NFL. So maybe there's something to it. Maybe a team is trying to get him to fall to them. I don't know, but that's got me a little concerned. But if the 49ers do pick him, I have to imagine that, that's come out clear. I did see you say that you don't think the 49ers would take a red flag player at 11. And so I want to ask you what you would constitute as a red flag player, because, I think at 11, it's kind of no man's land. Like, I think there's a lot of prospects that you'd have some question marks about, right? Like, I think there's upside there. Even the 4 names we've mentioned, Nolan, character concerns, Stewart, lack of production, Harmon, maybe medicals. I don't know, right? Like, so when you say that, like, what kind of red flags are you talking about? Are you talking about more so character? Are you talking like injury history type of player? Like, what kind of red flags do you think the 49ers will really look to avoid at 11?
Yeah, both of those. And what I don't know is what their final determination on the character stuff is. I get a list of draft prospects by, the area of the various rounds that they're expected to go in. And I can't say who I get it from, but it's pretty accurate every year. And this person has the names. Most of the names are just in black type, standard black type. But some of the names are in red, and those are the medical guys. And some of the names are in blue, and those are the character guys. And some of the names are in purple, which is a combination of the two. And the 49ers draft visit list had, I don't know, almost half a dozen, maybe not quite that, maybe 4 or 5 of those guys on it. And some of them, like I said, were the medical guys. Josh Simmons, for example, everybody knows about his medical background. But there were some other ones as well. And I'm not going to say the names because I don't know. I mean, it could be something as innocuous as the guy majored in molecular biology and wants to become a doctor. And the 49ers just want to make sure that, this is the type of guy who's going to, give everything to the game of football and isn't going to be just doing it as a lark because he's got, his eyes on a different career. So, yeah, character covers a lot of. It's a very broad term. It's not always bad behavior or something like that. But I think in this draft in particular, this is sort of the meat and potatoes draft. We're just going to kind of revitalize our team with a lot of good picks that they're not looking to make, a grand slam home run at 11. They're going to take somebody that they're comfortable with and that they feel like they can depend on. So it's very hard to see them taking a risky player at that pick. I think they're going to go with the safest bet that, the highest drafted, safest bet that, or I should say the highest rated, safest bet that they have, who's on the board.
Okay. And yeah, I agree. I mean, I think they have to find an impact player. There are those that will be available. Maybe not as much as you would have found in like other drafts picking at 11, but in any case, like I think they'll be able to find someone there. Now, you mentioned Kenneth Grant earlier, and you've mentioned him as a dark horse pick for the 49ers. And so I want to ask you, when you say that, do you picture that being a pick at 11 that could be a dark horse, or do you see that in the scenario of like a trade back if they did find a partner?
Well, certainly the trade back, but I mean, it would not shock me. I'd be mildly surprised, I guess, if he was the pick at 11. But like I said, I mean, there are people that believe that Grant is the best DT in this draft. Because of, it doesn't happen all the time, but he's kind of showing that he can move that 335-pound frame around really well. He's got a good feel for the position. He bats down a lot of passes. You look at what the Eagles defensive tackle from Georgia is able to do. He just dominates on the inside. I mean, he's just a one-man wrecking crew in there, and that's what you want. So I mean, he's a bit of a risk too, because he didn't show that all the time at Michigan. Graham was definitely the more consistent of the two. But if you fall in love with Kenneth Grant, and by the way, his character I've heard is stellar, like just the most lovely person. Everybody loves this guy to death. He'd be a great kind of addition to a locker room like the 49ers locker room is. So I mean, it'll be interesting. I have no idea who they're going to take, and really I wouldn't be surprised with much. Ashton Genty would surprise me there. I think if Genty did get to 11, I mean, I think that's your mechanism for trading back and maybe getting Grant or Harmon, at 20 or wherever they trade back to. But I think that would be the 49ers dream scenario, is that Genty somehow falls, or maybe it's Tyler Warren and some team wants to zoom up and get that guy. And maybe it's Kelvin Banks. Maybe it's a tackle. They're so hard to find that maybe a team feels like Kelvin Banks is the guy. The 49ers trade back into the 20s, and then they get one of the guys we just talked about, and a third rounder to boot. So that would be the ideal scenario. I don't think John Lynch thinks it's going to happen. I think he's probably been making those calls already and is getting a lot of dial tones, but they would jump at the opportunity too, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And, there's been a lot of final mock drafts that have dropped in the last day or so. And Daniel Jeremiah dropped his, earlier today. And he has Gray Zabel as the 49ers pick at 11. Talk about a dark horse. Like, that one would be a huge shocker.
Where did he go to school?
NDSU. I think the 49ers are a bit familiar with that one.
Yeah, imagine 49ers fans if the 49ers pick North Dakota State guy in the first round. they would go apoplectic at that. Although it is an offensive lineman, and there are a lot of people that feel like that's got to be the focus, or more so than it has been in years past.
There has been buzz that tackles are going to fly off the board and earlier than some people think. But even then, I wouldn't expect Zabel to be one of those guys at 11. Like, is there a scenario where you see that being the pick for the 49ers, even with like other tackles like Josh Simmons, or we mentioned Kelvin Banks, potentially being there at 11 as well?
I don't think anybody's looking at him as a tackle. I think they're looking at him as a center. I think that's what the 49ers would, if they drafted Gray Zabel, they'd move him to center and would do it right away. So I don't want to say never and then look stupid down the line, but it's hard to see that happening. I don't think he visited with them. Does that mean that they have no interest? No, it could mean that Chris Verster went down to Southern California and trained with him there and gave him a workout and things like that. So Zabel was working out with Caleb Rogers and Jonah Monheim from USC, two guys who did visit. And I thought that, Caleb Rogers was kind of a late addition to our list of visitors. And I've only recently been kind of watching his film and talking to people about him, but I think that the 49ers see him as a center. He played right tackle last year for Texas Tech, but I don't know if he has the length to play tackle in the NFL. My guess is that he's so good on the run and is smart and has been there for a long time and was a team captain, that they're eyeing him as certainly as an interior pass protector, but probably as a center. So that may be the center that they're looking at in the 4th, 5th round.
I know a lot of 49er fans were seeing, Daniel Jeremiah's mock, and they were like, what is going on? Like, that would be horrible. But, framing it that way, hey, this could potentially be the replacement of Jake Brendel, who, as 49er fans love him. So,
Right.
people would probably then understand a little bit more, maybe like Zabel as an option there a little bit more if that were how the 49ers were seeing it. But, the 49ers love to surprise us. So even though we have like maybe four guys that everyone has been mentioning for them, it's not uncommon that they pull something out of left field in these first rounds, and so I'm always prepared for that as well. And so I think it's a good exercise to have a dark horse as well. So definitely good to get your thoughts on that. Kenneth Grant, I think, is a good one if they want to go that route. And they're not adverse to reaching for players, right? Like they have their own consensus. They don't care about anyone's big boards or where mock drafts have guys going. Like, they truly have a certain ranking for these guys. But the fact that they have 21st round grades on players this year, as John Lynch said, I think that does, kind of say that maybe there's less chances for a reach this year as maybe in some other years where they had less guys in the first round that they liked there. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, but I definitely think it'll be an entertaining day nonetheless. Now, I do want to ask you like your thoughts on second round, and of course, what the 49ers do at 43 is largely dependent on what happens at 11 and what happens, the remainder of the first round. But I want to get your thoughts on a potential trade up from 43, because 43 is like just far enough from the top of the second that you're kind of missing out on, the crop of guys that are going to go right from the beginning of the second, where teams are moving up trying to get those guys. I'm sure we'll see a run on maybe some quarterbacks, maybe some wide receivers in there, and so I'm curious if you think the 49ers would be in a position to trade up there. Let's say hypothetically they go defensive tackle, Nolan or Graham with pick 11. There's a decent amount of, I think, edge rushers that would be available in that range that would make sense for the 49ers to want to target there. Do you think they would just kind of stand pat at 43, or would they maybe move up and get one of those guys? Maybe, yeah. Personally, I would even rule out them wanting to come back to the back end of the first round to get one of those top edges that maybe happen to make it that far.
Well, the benefit of that is that you have the guy under contract for 5 years instead of 4, which at defensive end is a big deal, because if the guy turns out to be good, he's going to be very, very pricey. So, I mean, I guess the question would be who would be there. I mean, I think a lot of people anticipate James Pierce falling down. 49ers had him for a visit. Again, just like Walter Nolan, I don't know what their assessment was during the visit, but he might be there. Nick Scorton would be somebody who I think fits the profile that we just kind of described. He was actually more productive than Shamar Stewart at Texas A&M, and he was really productive when he was at Purdue. Just a kind of a bigger thumper on the edge there. So there would be some kind of scheme fits for them at that spot. I don't think that they're going to do that. I just think that, what John Lynch said yesterday was an honest thought, that this draft is good on depth, and this team has a lot of picks, and this is the draft to use all of those picks instead of trying to come up for an elite talent. I think the elite talents are gone pretty quickly in this draft, and there's a lot of kind of evenness, say, midway through the first round through the third round, really. So I think that's what the 49ers will do. If they went DT in round 1, I think it would probably be offensive tackle in round 2. That's where they would get a Josh Connerly who kind of fits their mold pretty well. I think he's similar to Kelvin Banks in a lot of ways, a guy that they might consider at 11, and would benefit from playing behind Trent Williams for a year or how many years it takes. But he moves very well, so he'd fit that zone blocking scheme really well. If they had to wait until the third round, Anthony Belton might still be there.
Yeah.
And he's a thumper. I mean, you don't have to worry about him being bull rushed. He's got that under control. Chase Lunt is an intriguing guy at Connecticut. He really moves well. Doesn't quite have the length that ideally you'd like. He reminds me a lot of Roger Rosengarten, a guy that the 49ers were looking at last year. And I think it was drafted by the Ravens. But I think end of the third round, fourth round is where Lunt is kind of projected to go. So you can't wait too long, though, to get that spot, to get that position, because they're not going to be there for very long.
I agree. And I do think like with all the reports coming out that a lot of tackles could go in the first round, I could see Connolly going, in the first round as well. Maybe even Nursery.
Yeah.
That'd be a bit of a surprise, but I mean, it could happen if there's a run on them. But I agree. I think second round or one of their 2 third-round picks is a prime spot to get one of these guys. And you mentioned a lot of guys that I like. I think the other one, Charles Grant, out of William Mary, would be a great fit for the 49ers and would probably go in that range as well. I know they had him in for workouts, they worked him out. So, obviously maybe there's some interest there. So it makes some sense. There's some intriguing names. Belton is one that, man, that guy has size. I mean, I definitely wouldn't be worried about him fitting like the profile as far as his size. Maybe at the next level, he could slim down a little bit and maybe that increases speed a little bit. But yeah, I think there's going to be some nice options for them there. Now, knowing that the 49ers have the 21st round grades, the 49ers always have these gold helmet players, and it's not always, specific to the first round, right? I'm sure they have some of these guys throughout the draft that they really like. And actually, what was interesting, I thought it was interesting that last year they didn't really disclose who those guys were or like who they picked, right? I think they ended up picking one of those guys and they didn't say who it was.
Yeah, this was the first year without Adam Peters, and he was the one that would always disclose them. So when Peters moved on, I think we probably lost that bit of information. If I had to guess, if there was one in last year's class, I would guess Malik Mustafa as the
That
guy.
was my
He
guess
seems to
as well.
hit all the criteria that they hold forth for that. So. That's probably right, and if he was, and they drafted him, it's another good hit on that gold helmet category.
Yeah, and so I want to ask you from this draft class, from the guys that you've watched and just from the guys that you've read up on that are good fits for the 49ers, high character guys, do you have one guess of who 49ers gold helmet player would be?
I'm trying to think through the visit list, like who was the team captain. I just mentioned Caleb Rogers.
So do they always bring in their gold helmet player guys for visits, or like, I mean, I don't know if there's ever been a scenario in which they haven't and they ended up drafting that guy.
Yeah, let's see. McKivitz, Trey Lance, that was the COVID year, so there was no visit. Talanoa Hufanga, I don't think that he visited. But yeah, that would make sense, because of what I said earlier. Like they like to bring in guys they have question marks about. So,
Yeah.
and Derek Harmon, for example, wasn't on their visit list. But they also went up to Oregon and had a long conversation with Dan Lanning. So I would think that for all the Oregon players, and I know Connerly is coming in or did come in, they have a pretty good sense of, I think that they're kind of reassured of that group. So No, Jeffrey Bossa didn't come in, but I think Lynch was seen kind of chatting him up in Eugene, and again, the head coach, I'm sure, talked about him. So I would be surprised. That would be one of my surprises if they get through this draft, if they have 11 picks, and none of them are Oregon players. That would be a bit of surprise because this draft is loaded with Oregon players. They happen to play all the positions that the 49ers need. And the 49ers have a good relationship with the head coach there, which is important to them.
Yeah, it is. And I saw like in your piece you put out today, which was great. You're talking about, the interview process the 49ers go through in wanting to find out more about these players. And it goes beyond that as well. They talk to these coaches to try to get intel on these players. And, they have their ways of finding out more about them, right? But I think they always go back to some of these wells, you can say, of these coaches that they have good relationships with. And, Dan Lanning being one of those guys. And I agree. I think they're definitely going to come away with at least one of these Oregon guys. And there's going to be plenty of them that will have a chance to get at least one. If I had to guess for a gold helmet player, my guess is Femi Oladejo, who they didn't have in for a visit, but he's been linked to the 49ers a ton. He's been linked to a lot of teams at this point. It just seems like he's such a likable guy. I got to talk to him at the Senior Bowl, and I could see why teams would really love him. He has a ton of confidence, and there's just a great energy around him that I can see the 49ers with all the interactions that they've had with him, particularly at the Senior Bowl, KJ Wright coaching him out there. I'm sure he'd be one of those guys that they would really like. So that'd be my guess for gold helmet. And Matt, I'm surprised you didn't say Chris Paul, Pooh Paul Jr.
I probably should have said Chris Paul. To be honest, I don't know whether he was a team captain last year or not. He had the green dot, so he was calling the plays on defense. But in this day and age when they're transferring all the time, and he transferred from Arkansas to Ole Miss last year, I don't know if that kind of affects the captaincy thing. Usually the captain has been there at the school for, he's a fourth year guy and stuff like that. So it may be harder to kind of figure out who the gold helmet guys are. But I think Paul, certainly has no character concerns. The only concern about him is that his arms are 30 inches long, which is, 2.5 inches shorter than Dre Greenlaw's. You see that and you think, oh, he must have had a ton of missed tackles in college. He really didn't. And you can't, he doesn't look like a short arm guy when you're watching him on film. So I don't know. The picture that you tweeted out the other day of him standing next to Fred Warner. Fred Warner's huge for a linebacker these days. And he's very linear. And, Paul did not look out of place standing next to him. He looked like Dre Greenlaw would standing next to Fred Warner. So, I mean, that picture of those two could become a famous picture because that could be the new duo. I think if they took Chris Paul in the third round, he'd have a real good shot of winning that weak side linebacker job. It would be between him and D. Winters, and both guys would play a lot. The other guy would play the strong side spot. And it could be that D. Winters begins the season there, and if he doesn't work out, then Paul would come in. But I think that the 49ers want to give D. Winters some competition for that spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And in hearing Kyle Shanahan's comments about the linebacker position, he was specifically asked about D. Winters, and he kind of went into, hopefully we'll bring in some competition. So I think that's very self-reflective it's reflective of how the 49ers see the linebacker position right now. Obviously losing Dre Greenlaw, big loss, but not just that. We don't know if we could put all our trust in D. Winters staying healthy for a full season, right? So, and filling those shoes. So they definitely got to bring in some competition. Now, I was a little surprised that they only brought in 2 linebackers, including Pupal, in for visits. Did that kind of surprise you? Because I think at one point too, like you maybe hinted that there would be, more linebackers that they would bring in. Did you think that, or like, were you surprised by only 2 being on the list?
Yeah, I was. I mentioned Jeffrey Bossa. He's another guy that just kind of fits the profile really well. He might be a guy that they just didn't feel like they needed to bring in because of the trip to Eugene. There's a bunch of other guys. I mean, I thought that Carson Schlesinger from UCLA is just out of the right mold for that position for the 49ers. So I was a little surprised that they didn't have a workout with him, or they didn't bring him in for a visit. It could be that they just are determined to take a different position in the second round, and they just don't think that he's going to be there. But he fits. Nick Martin from Oklahoma State fits really well. He runs really well. They didn't bring him in for a visit. So, yeah, I mean, I guess there's a couple of names that we still don't know as far as visits. I forget what
There's
the total
2.
came to.
There's
Two.
2
Yeah.
that we don't know. So.
Yeah, there's 2 mystery men, and I wonder if they end up taking one of those guys and what positions they play. I don't know if we'll ever get the 49ers to actually divulge their entire list, but maybe I'll make that a goal of mine.
Well, I try to make it a goal, Matt. So, but between us 2, I think we can do it. So 28, I think, is the most that we've gotten.
I don't know if I've ever beaten 28. And by the way, this will crush your spirit when I tell you this. It wasn't too long ago that they would hold that pre-draft press conference, and they would pass out a sheet of, these are the 30 visitors that we had in. And they would just like hand them out to all the media members. So they weren't quite as guarded. I think that practice probably ended like around 2007, 2008. And everything got hyper competitive. But it used to be that wasn't a big deal if you found them out. Now the 49ers are actively trying not to divulge.
Well, now we know like the bit of the trend. Like more often than not, they're drafting at least 3 of those 30 visit guys. So I think they've maybe have caught on to us catching on to their visit trend a bit. But yeah, I mean, always interesting to look at that list. Another thing that looking at that list, you don't see any running backs. And for a class that's going to be super deep at running backs, and we know Kyle Shanahan loves those, he's going to get himself one. I think we know that. And so is there a short list of running backs that, maybe you're thinking could be some good fits that Kyle Shanahan, would really love to have?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the case because Bobby Turner does a ton of work on those guys. And so they feel reassured that they've got the kind of character questions wrapped up. I mean, that's basically what Bobby Turner is trying to figure out. I mean, he calls players incessantly and has them call him back at certain times. And it basically is, is this guy mature? Is he a professional? Can I count on this guy? So that may explain why there were no running backs on the list. I mean, I asked Kyle Shanahan this the other day when I was talking to him for that story about Topgolf, and he said really they like all types of runners. It's hard to pin them down on one type, and I know that the speedy Raheem Mostert / Isaac Guerrero type has been popular, and there are several guys that can do that in this year's draft, but they've liked other guys as well. I mean, Davis Price wasn't like that. Trey Sermon wasn't like that. I'm not exactly sure what it was that caught their eye with those guys, but they like different types of players. The speedsters are Bashal Tutin from Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
and he played in a zone running offense. So it wouldn't be a hard evaluation for the 49ers. Jaden Blue from Texas.
Yep.
Jordan James, do I have his first name right, from Oregon? I've heard that they've spent a lot of time with him. He's not so much a burner, but he's really good as a pass catcher, really natural. And then I like the guy from Texas Tech. I can't pull his name right now, but he's a bigger runner. He sort of reminds me, not quite Jordan Mason violence, but that type of size. He's just a very kind of mature type of player. I imagine he'd be the type of guy that
Taj Brooks. Sorry.
Yeah, Taj Brooks. Yes, Taj Brooks. And he's been there forever. He could be a gold helmet guy. But I imagine that a kind of old school coach like Bobby Turner would appreciate a guy like Taj Brooks.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those guys would make a ton of sense. Jaden Blue, he's got the speed as well. You know, it fits in the exact outside zone system. Kyle Shanahan, you know, pretty close to Texas, so he could probably get some intel there as well. And let's not forget, Frank Gore, also part of the scouting process too, for the 49ers. And, you know, I'm sure he has some extra thoughts on some of these guys as well. Now, I want to ask you this, because the 49ers held their local pro day. Good prospects. Teddy Buchanan, I like, you know, lump him into the names of linebackers that they could potentially get if Pupal is not one of those day two guys that they get. I want to ask you about Patrick Willis being there, because I found it very interesting, and I'm surprised no one else really batted an eye about it, that Patrick Willis would be present and just happen to be in the vicinity at a local pro day. I mean, so my first thought, Matt, was like, is Patrick Willis interested in scouting or coaching at all? Because I remember Frank Gore, you know, he'd kind of just be in the building too. And we'd hear about this before, you know, he finally got a title within the scouting department. And so do you get that sense with Patrick Willis at all, and have any inkling as to why he was there for the 49ers local pro day?
No, but I mean, now that you bring it up, it makes perfect sense. I mean, he's in the area. He likes to be by the facility. He was around a lot last year in training camp and sometimes during the season. Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense. I mean, I will, if I get somebody to the side, I'll ask that question. Be a great one. I mean, he was chatting up Buchanan during the local pro day, and maybe that was not just happenstance. Maybe the 49ers were interested in, you know, how Willis interacts with these guys and what his takeaways were. It would make a ton of sense.
Yeah, so I'm intrigued. Definitely, we'll circle back on that one, and very interested. But yeah, that'd be great. Matt, thank you so much for joining and talking all things draft. I'm really excited for tomorrow. I'm sure it'll be a busy day for you as well. And so if you guys, anyone that's watching, if you guys aren't subscribed to The Athletic, it's seriously like the best investment you can make, because there's always great content. Matt puts out great content, and it's like it's different content, you know, like it's not the everyday type of 49ers insights and, you know, types of articles you're going to get from other, you know, sites. That's kind of a lot of the same thing. There's some redundancy there. I think you bring a different side of it. Like, for example, the piece you put out today about the visits and about Topgolf and how Kyle Shanahan feels about interviews. Like, I think that was some really great insight. And so great example of the kind of content you put out at The Athletic. So thanks, Matt, for joining. Really appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully we could do this again next year as well.
No, I look forward to it. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for having me on. I enjoy talking about the draft, and I enjoy talking about it with somebody who's been following it as closely as I have, and I know you're one of those people.
For sure. Nerding out for the draft forever. But all right, everyone that's tuned in, make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Audio listeners, leave a rating, leave a review. Really appreciate it. Will be plenty of draft content coming at you tomorrow. So make sure you guys keep it locked. Turn those notifications on. But for now, have a good rest of your Wednesday, folks. Peace.